What's happening, guys? Austin here with DevvE, and today we're doing Tech Talks with Tom. Tom, thank you so much for joining me, my friend. And so there's a lot to pick through, and we're going to be putting these out in like kind of a series of talks that you and I are going to be doing, breaking down some of the various tech that's inherent in the Devx chain. And the first thing I wanted to talk to you about is the fraud, theft, and loss. Now, I know that this is something that is, I don't know, dare I say foreign to the crypto natives, but it's something that is really important and, just intrinsic to the Devx ecosystem, the DevvE ecosystem. And so could you dive in a little bit into maybe the genesis of that, how and why it came about, and like kind of how it works?
Yeah, sure. So I think the fraud, theft, and loss, and some of the other kind of concepts in DevvE stem originally from when we first were getting going. So as we're starting the tech talks, it's probably good even just a little bit of background. Like when we first
Sure.
started 8 years ago, saw enormous opportunity in the blockchain space. To me, blockchain is one of the few technologies I think we'll see in our lifetime that really fundamentally changes computing on par with the internet. Where the internet is a disruptive platform that lets people transfer data, blockchain is a disruptive platform that lets people transfer value. And that's where we saw world-changing implications. But the problem, though, is there wasn't technology that really solved all the problems you have to solve to build a real business. Huge problems in scalability, privacy, the fraud, theft, and loss, like we're going to talk about, stability. Cost is one of the big ones. Interoperability is another big one. And so, given that there was no solution to those problems, we designed a blockchain from scratch that was really intended to be implemented in enterprise level use and kind of real world business use. And so when you look at that, type of approach, you have to have the things that make businesses run that people rely on. Any of us in the crypto space know how nerve-wracking it is to, send a transaction, and we all send test transactions and pay double the fees. And especially if it's like a big amount, it's like, oh, is this going to go through? And you're sitting there waiting for like 5 minutes on either scan, like, oh God, did it go through? Did something go wrong? That kind of thing. So the crypto space is nerve-wracking. So it's got balance. It has the nice aspects where you can have your own wallet, transfer things in the scheme of things pretty inexpensively, including big amounts. But it'd be nice if you had the benefits of the crypto space along with the stuff that we just rely on. Like, what if you put in a
Mhm.
wrong address and something gets sent to nowhere? Sucks getting lost. What if you spill lemonade on your laptop and it gets in gets sent to a dump, and you lose what ends up
that poor,
being
that poor
millions of
guy.
dollars of Bitcoin later, that kind of stuff. So
Yep.
fraud, theft, and loss is something we all rely on in our real world use. Like if your bank account was drained, there's recourse in the real world, right? And so melding those two, I think, is going to be a really powerful concept. So that's kind of the base idea behind it originally. And again, it was part of the original vision of what we've been doing.
So just to expand upon that a little bit, I know that, for years, and you really brought me back to my first days in crypto. I forgot about doing stuff like that, or how nerve wracking that is for new folks. But so people for years, and there's been, big networks who have had, big name partnerships, and they like to throw around, you know, adoption as kind of a buzzword, but then you kind of find out, well, there was some backroom deals going on to get them to use the network and things like that. But what it sounds to me like, Tom, from what you're saying, is that for us to actually move in this new direction, at least from your perspective, we're going to have to kind of merge the two worlds a little bit closer than they have been. Am I accurate in saying that?
Yeah, yeah, I think the writing's on the wall. The crypto space is growing up. You have things like the BlackRock ETFs for Bitcoin and Ethereum, and I imagine there will be more. So big institutional monies get involved in the space, and and that's good for everybody who's in the crypto space. But as it grows, it's going to just become more and more regulated. And regulators and countries insist on largely preventing fraud, preventing money laundering, preventing terrorism, and they're just ultimately not going to let people do things unless those check boxes are checked. And so again, the crypto space is growing up. The writing's on the wall, so might as well have that mentality moving forward from here.
Sure. And okay, so let's dig into this a little bit. Now, before we get into the actual tech behind it, are there any networks out there that are iterating in a way similar to this? Because I don't actually personally know of any.
None that I know of. I think one of the big challenges, like you could take smart contracts on Ethereum, for example, and you could implement, a fraud, theft, and loss solution. But the problem, though, is it's built at the smart contract level versus the kind of validation level, and so you really can't do what our approach does. And so and these are kind of core concepts. These are things that need to be implemented by the validators on the system when they're adding blocks to the blockchain. And so I don't know of any other blockchain that's kind of taken this approach. One of the things that we did, as an example, is we submitted patents, early on. And one of our patent categories, I know we're going to talk about it in a different segment, is the privacy patent. But it's a good example of kind of the mentality. And so we submitted our privacy patent to the PCT, or the PCT filing, on it, which is international filing, is what I meant. And we got back that there's no prior art, and that never happens on a patent. So it was just, to me, a good example of, a lot of the crypto space back in 2017, 2016 really wasn't looking at the way it's evolved up to this point, where it is starting to grow up and starting to move into real world kind of implementations. And so when you think about things in a different way, you design them from the ground up in that way. And if you didn't do that, and you have a blockchain that's already out and running, you can't change it, right? And so having really had that kind of foresight from 8 years ago in our designs from the beginning, from the ground up, which is now more and more every year that passes, more and more seeing that these are the things that are going to be driving the future. It's pretty compelling. Like, I don't see, like, the scalability was big for a long time, right? But I still haven't seen the level that privacy is going to hit. Like, that's still in the future. There's going to be a point, mark my words, that privacy is going to be this huge concept in the blockchain space, because then it's growing up and it's going to be needed for real business. Fraud, theft, and loss is going to suddenly become this massive thing, and everyone's going to be talking about how they do it. The crypto space is like this, eat the latest thing, meme coins,
Yep.
DeFi, GameFi, right? And so as it starts growing up, bigger companies start using it. Then you have these real world business needs that those entities require, and if you start to see big customers using these concepts, but they need these, and in order to really drive that next level of growth for a layer one, you have to have these things in place. They're going to suddenly become like, oh, who has this, who has that, right? And so having designed it in from the beginning, I think it's going to really suit us well for where the crypto space, everyone can see is headed.
So, okay, again, I have another question for you. Just hearing you talk, you got me excited. I was smiling because I was picturing the feeling you got when you got that message back from the patent office saying no prior art. It must have been like oh, my head just rolled right off my shoulders onto the floor type of moment there. But
Yeah.
having these blocking level patents for these really important pieces of technology, what does that mean moving forward once the consummation starts happening in the industry?
So, patents are just one part of an overall game the traditional, business world uses. I think a lot of the cypherpunk mentality that the crypto space has had, is really kind of anti-establishment, anti the types of things that drive patents. And the crypto space has already grown up a lot. There's a lot of people submitting patents at this point, but in those early days, they weren't. And it's in those early days that one can get blocking level patents where, so I think with the way privacy will head, I think everyone is going to need to use our approach one or another, so, and then, patents are just one, again, aspect. A lot of it is just, architecture and design. Again, you can implement fraud, theft, and loss protections on a Ethereum smart contract, but if it's not designed from the beginning, you can't add it in later. It's too core of a concept, and again, it's going to become more and more important for usage. And if you did design it in from the beginning, then you're going to ultimately have a huge competitive advantage.
Amazing, amazing. All right, so let's dive into it. So, how would you explain the fraud, theft, and loss solution to somebody who doesn't really have much technical knowledge or just kind of needs it
Yeah, so the idea of fraud, theft, loss protections, we're all used to it in kind of our real world, interactions. We all have bank accounts, we've all bought stuff online. So, if you buy something online and then there's no it doesn't arrive, there's recourse, right? You buy it with a credit card, you can complain, get your money back, that kind of thing. If somebody, passes away and they have an estate, they put in their will, who gets any of the assets. There's mechanisms in the traditional world of how to get access to those bank accounts and those other assets and transfer them to their heirs, that kind of stuff. But those concepts don't exist in the crypto space. And so if you want to use crypto in kind of a broader way, if you want to use it to buy things online, for example, there has to be recourse if things don't arrive. So that's really kind of where the fraud, theft, and loss protections come from. So each of fraud, theft, and loss has its own logic problem. So let's start with the loss concept. It's a pretty, I think, clever and interesting logic set. For the solution. So let's say you lose your private key. And therefore if you have Bitcoin, you lost your private key, not my key, not my assets. But the flip side of that is, if you lose the private key, it's gone forever. And so it's a big problem, and the idea that you could lose everything, it's also a little bit nerve wracking. Like if you enter the password on like a Ledger Nano, a hard wallet or something, and it says wrong, and you get 3 tries,
Yeah.
so you get it wrong once, usually you get it the second time right. But again, the whole thing is it's just nerve wracking. It's just not the way the traditional world works, and it doesn't have the bumpers that make real business work. Okay, so let's say you lose your private key on DevX. Well, what you could do before that is enter a token into your wallet that defines these are the rules on which I can recover my assets. And if you don't do that ahead of time, like if you are a crypto traditionalist, you don't have to use these features, then you lose the key and that's it, right? But I think a lot of people, especially the general public, as it starts to expand, are going to want these features. So you could put a loss protection token in your wallet, and then what happens is it has rules around which you could transfer the assets to another wallet. So let's say you lose your private key, you set it up where 3 of your friends and have their own signature capabilities, and you need 2 out of the 3 to sign. And so you go to your friends, I lost my private key, could you enter that code, enter that transaction, all the assets get moved over to a new wallet, and then you've recovered, right? So that part of it's straightforward. So if there's loss, then there's a mechanism, and there's recourse to handle loss. But then that begs the question, well, what happens if your 2 friends, 2 of your friends get together and go, hey, did you see all the money he made?
I'm glad you said it, because I was about to. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So let's steal it, right? So what happens is those 2 friends who are now, stealing, into that same transaction, moves the assets over to a new wallet, but it gets held in that wallet for a time frame, say 30 days, for example, right? And again, you define that in your loss protections. So then you get a notice that that was triggered, it went through, it's held, it can't be moved for those 30 days. And in this case, where it's theft, you didn't lose your private key, and so the system is set up where you can reverse that transaction if you have your original private key. So it's recourse with loss, but no actual need for trust, because if something happens and you didn't lose your private key, then you can reverse it. Then you throw that token out, don't give those friends trust ever again. And also they won't do it because they know they won't get away with it, like the system's set up that way. And a lot of this, I think, is not going to actually be 3 friends that do it. Probably could do it that way, but a lot of it is really going to be more professional organizations that'll say, here's our services, and you pay for this, and this is how you do the recovery and everything, and a small fee. And again, it's all the traditional stuff in the real world we're used to. If people want to use it, they can. A lot of people will want to. Gives you a lot of security. You don't have all your stuff just lost. You have recourse, upon someone's death, that kind of thing. But you can set up how you want. So.
I have an interesting question for you all right. So, I have 2 questions, but the one that I want to ask you is, so how Ledger came out with this the key recovery service, the seed mnemonic phrase recovery service recently. And,
right.
and I must be honest, like when they released that, I went, You've been telling us for years you can't get our seed phrase off of this device. Now you're telling us you save it on 3 servers and shard it out.
Right.
Which is it, right? And you know the CEO did answer. He said, "Well, look, if we get a subpoena, then yeah, we're going to turn over your private your seed phrase, which means okay, you do actually have access to it." My question is, if the conditions of the token are not met, for example, is it the sort of thing where you know a subpoena came down? I guess you could subpoena individuals. As I'm asking the question, I'm kind of answering my own question. But is it the sort of thing where that sort of access would be had as well? Do you get what I'm saying there, Tom?
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. So I wasn't bothered by the Ledger Nano hoopla, like everybody got upset about it. Because again, it's the same kind of philosophy we're describing. The traditional kind of world likes those types of things. We all have it in our bank accounts. We don't give it, second thought. And you don't have to sign up for it. So I didn't sign up. Like for me, the point of the hard
Right.
wallet is
Neither
that's
did
the
I.
place where I'm in control of, my stuff. But it didn't bother me that they did it, because it was optional, right? So a little bit like anybody that complains about it, just don't do it,
Right.
And if you want that service, but what I'm describing actually is a step better than that. It allows the recourse for loss, but it still puts you in control of stuff, right? So let's say the government subpoenaed, went to the recovery service and said transfer all those assets out. This person didn't pay their taxes. Well, in this case, the mechanics, the math of the validation network is it went out, didn't really have your permission. You still have the private key, and you transfer it back. So I mean, there's going to be that doesn't mean you're going to get away with it. Like again, we're
Right.
talking in
Right.
the real world where the government has recourse and stuff. So maybe you're doing a McAfee where you're running around the world hiding, that kind of thing. But
Rest in peace, John.
yeah, right.
Right.
It's recourse for loss, but no trust enabled, and it's a step better in that sense than what Ledger did. So
Okay. And as far as the token goes, this was my other question. And it sounds like there's a large degree of customizability with this.
yeah,
And
right. Yeah.
is there a
So
learning curve with that? Or is it like, here's your options. How do you want to do it? How does
well,
that
you've
work?
seen everything that we do. It's all kind of Web 2 regular
Mm-hmm.
interfaces, so all of our interfaces are going to be, PayPal-like interfaces,
Pick your
easy to get
options and
on,
go.
use. Yeah, just set it up. So that's all going to be easy. Like MetaMask is a pretty impressive product when you think about what it's done, tying in with all of these networks and the foundation that it's needed to work on. But even that, and that's the best of kind of the crypto UI. And even that, is just hard to use, often isn't working and stuff. And so again, when you start getting into mainstream, you can't have that type of mentality. It has to be a Web 2 easy to use interface. And then that also ties in with the fraud and theft types of concepts, right? So let's say you want to pay somebody, you buy a, I don't know, making it up, a lawnmower on Craigslist or whatever, and you want to pay them. You can pay them and then put flag Dev Protect on it, and then the person that's receiving it, before they give you the lawnmower, they can agree to use Dev Protect or not, right? So again, it's just
Mm-hmm.
like the other philosophy. If you don't want to use it, if you're a crypto purist, you don't have to use Dev Protect. But on a given transaction, if you want to use it, you just flag it as this is Dev Protected, which is kind of an innate escrow service, is the way you think of it. So
Mm-hmm.
you don't actually hire a third party escrow. It's all mathematical, and so again, there's no trust on it. It's just defining it. So the sender and the receiver basically agree that, all right, the payment's coming through with these terms. The receiver receives it, gives the lawnmower, and then it's in escrow for a time period, then it unlocks, right? And then the guy actually gets the lawnmower, or maybe I should pick something that can be mailed or whatever, right? But however it gets transferred, receives it, then they can release the unlock early, because they're in control of that side of it. Or
Mm-hmm.
that what it sets up is that if things don't go right before the funds release, then there's you can define this ahead of time. And again, there's going to be services, including DevvE probably will do it. Have services for dispute resolution, right? And that's what makes Visa so valuable and so powerful and so globally accepted, is they have a very robust dispute resolution system, right? If you buy something, you're safe. There's been times where I've been charged and I thought, God, these guys, like, they have sleazy business practices. They're just running it month to month. I forgot about it when I finally realized. And then Visa's like, well, we already had this argument. You should have canceled it. So there's balance in it, right? It's not just for the sellers. It's not just for the buyers. It's dispute resolution. There's two sides to every story. And so what we've created is the mechanisms that allow that, right? So the same thing that makes Visa so usable. Most of us have, credit cards, or a lot of us have credit cards, right? And so they're very useful when you're buying things online, or just in general using them. And you get to a point where you don't, think about it, and it's rare that you have a dispute. But knowing that it's there lets you rely on it. So we created kind of the crypto version of that, and again at a consensus level. And it's powerful tools, because you can use those tools in different ways. So you could have customized kind of dispute resolution for specific industries. Like, you could have, ESG related assets that enterprises buy, that, if it ultimately ends up the data wasn't valid, and they didn't live up to their obligations, you could use dev protect, in that type of setting as well. It's a powerful tool, for implementing fraud, theft, and loss protections.
That was a beautiful explanation. And as you were talking, really my final question to you, and forgive me if you can't answer this, but how big of a role is this going to play in the Dev Exchange? Because I would imagine it's got a big cornerstone type of role here.
Yeah, no, it'll be huge in Dev Exchange. So what we envision with Dev Exchange is that it's going to be a modern type of exchange, with the regulatory compliance, admittedly, that you're going to have to do, which includes, things like KYC, but this non-custodial nature. That's the big but. That's the thing, is that, it'll have to work within kind of regulation, but it's going to be non-custodial. But then a big part of the philosophy then is it also is, even with that non-custodial nature, still has to be high speed, high throughput. It needs to be cost effective. You need to have kind of instant trades. They all happen very quickly. And so, given our blockchain's speed and throughput and cost effectiveness, we can create a centralized exchange type of experience, with a decentralized exchange, type of mentality, a non-custodial mentality. But if you're going to really build a next gen exchange, it has to work. Again, that other next step then is not only in regulation, but in the way that the masses, that mainstream, expects. Easy to use interface, high speed, low cost, but protections. That your stuff doesn't get lost. You're not always worried about hackers. There's recourse if there is. And when you start getting more average people, the horror stories that we all have lived with in the kind of early days of the crypto space, those won't fly when you start hitting mainstream. And Dev Protect lets you have the protections you need for it to be used by a broad audience. So
amazing. Final thing I was thinking while you were talking, and just being somebody that's come from the decentralized exchange era and just kind of gotten used to that. I was at my dad's house the other day, and he's in his late 60s, and he was buying a token, and I was helping him set up his ledger, and he wrote down his 24 words, and he pulled out his cell phone, and if I had not slid my hand over his camera, he would have taken a picture of his 24 words, because to him, it didn't. What do you mean I can lose all of my money if somebody gets a hold of these words? And this,
right.
I was concerned there would be a learning curve, and just you explaining it to me alleviated that concern for my 70-year-old father.
He's a perfect
who wants
customer
to be in this industry.
Right? Yeah. He takes a picture, goes up to the cloud, somebody hacks his system, gets access to that picture, steals all his assets. Well, you who are helping him get set up, put in Dev Protect, he gets a notice that all the assets were stolen. Oh my God, what happened? Dad, you took a picture? You're like, you can't do that. This is what happens. All right, let's get your money back, right? And then you get it back, right? So he's a perfect example of kind of what we're shooting for. Just the more kind of mainstream people that, like, you and I know you can't take a picture of it. You don't want anything online with the 20 words. But other people don't, and you have a percentage, and probably a relatively high percentage, that don't realize those kinds of things. And when you have a high percentage that don't realize those kinds of things, it's just a fertile ground for lots of theft. And if it's fertile ground for lots of theft, then people don't move into it, right? So it all balances out. You have to have these things in place before you can move to that next phase where it really hits mainstream.
Bingo. Tom, beautiful explanation. Thank you so much for being here and explaining the fraud, theft, and loss protection to us. Hey, everyone, if you're watching and you like this content, do me a favor, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and we will be back with some more Tech Talks with Tom very soon. Catch you later.